She threw me out of my own son's wedding. She said in front of everyone that my place was at home, watching on TV. In that moment, the ballroom felt too small for so much silence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at the front row, where my name had been crossed out in pen, and swore to myself she would never forget what she did to me. The lights, the laughter, the flashes, all of it swirled around me as if the world had forgotten there was a mother's heart beating there too. The bride, Sabrina, smiled like she'd won, and I stood there, holding the invitation I once imagined I'd keep with pride. But life has a sharp sense of irony, because what looked like the end was only the beginning of how I'd be remembered. If you've ever been cropped out of a photo, told to keep quiet, or told you've outlived your usefulness, this story is for you. Tell me where you're watching from and whether you've lived something like this. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because here, every woman who's been forgotten gets seen again. Before the wedding, my life moved at a gentle pace. Mornings smelled like fresh bread and jasmine, the radio played old songs, and the piano. James left me filled the house with a sweet kind of longing. My son Ethan stopped by every Sunday for lunch. He brought flowers and stories from work, and I listened with that quiet pride of a mother who raises a child for the world, even knowing the world doesn't always love them back in the same measure. When he introduced me to Sabrina, I saw what every mother hopes to see, the glow of love in her son's eyes. She was polite, ambitious, almost too elegant, but she lacked something time teaches you to recognize: depth. Even so, I welcomed her. I offered my home, my advice, my time, and the pearl necklace I received on my wedding day, the same one my mother-in-law gave me, saying, "One day, pass it on when you feel the love is steady." Sabrina smiled and promised to take good care of it. I believed her. As the months went by, small changes began to surface. Ethan called less, the visits got shorter, and when they did come by, she always hurried to answer for him. "We've been so busy, Lillian," she'd say. And I'd smile, pretending not to hear the tone of someone who no longer spoke to me, only performed politeness. But in that house, among the photos and objects of a whole life, I still had something she didn't understand: roots. And roots aren't pulled up by indifference. They grow stronger in silence. In the days leading up to the wedding, I realized the ceremony would be less about love and more about appearances. But a mother is a mother. I went anyway. I wore the blue James loved, pinned my hair the way he liked, and promised myself I would feel proud, no matter what happened. I never imagined the what happened would be being erased from my own story. Ethan and Sabrina's wedding looked like something out of a magazine. The ballroom glowing, the air thick with lilies, guests smiling as if happiness were contagious. But there was an empty chair in the front row, mine. On it, a card with Lillian Carter crossed out in black pen. A single line, yet enough to erase me from the scene. I felt the floor tremble beneath my heels, and for a moment, I thought of leaving. But I stayed. Because mothers don't walk away, even when they're pushed out. When the orchestra began to play, people shifted in their seats. I saw Ethan walk in, handsome, nervous, and my heart still melted, despite everything. But the moment he looked my way, he turned his gaze too quickly. That's when I knew. He was aware. Throughout the ceremony, I tried to smile, but every detail felt carefully designed to shrink me. At the entrance, Sabrina greeted me with an air kiss. "Oh, Lillian, your dress is so original. Blue is a bold choice for your age." I laughed without replying, though my hands trembled. The fabric was the same one I'd sewn decades earlier for my own wedding to James. The color wasn't bold, it was memory. But to her, anything old held no worth. The final blow came during the speeches. Ethan took the microphone, emotional, and thanked the woman who raised him with so much love. But the name he spoke was Sabrina's. The whole room applauded. The sound of those claps tore through me. My face burned. My eyes stung. Then I realized the microphone being turned off when it was my turn wasn't a glitch. It was planned. No one noticed when I left. I walked to the parking lot, sat in my car, and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. The muffled music from the party mixed with the sound of the wind, and there, between noise and silence, a single tear fell, the only one I allowed. I reached into my purse, pulled out the invitation, and looked at it one last time. "You're part of our story," it read in gold letters. Funny, I never knew part could mean cut out of the whole. In the rearview mirror, I saw my reflection, tired eyes but steady. And right there, inside that car, I decided I wouldn't beg to be remembered. I would make sure I was impossible to forget. I started the engine, and the sound of it felt like the first real applause of the night. In the days that followed the wedding, the house seemed to breathe differently. The clock on the wall ticked louder, the wind through the windows felt colder, and even the smell of coffee seemed to have lost its warmth. Ethan didn't call. No messages, no visits. Only a short, formal email, the kind you'd send to a client, not your mother. "We're traveling. We'll talk when we get back. Hugs, E." Hugs. The word you use when you no longer want to touch someone. I saved the email without replying. Silence, I realized, was starting to suit me better than words. But something inside me shifted. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. The sharp pain from the wedding had turned into a steady thread of awareness, as if my soul were sniffing out what was still hidden. I began noticing details. Phone calls that ended quickly when I answered. Bank envelopes addressed to Ethan but sent to my house. Even Sabrina's messages, full of rehearsed kindness, smelled like control. "I hope you're well, Lillian. If you need anything, ask Ethan." It was a kind of politeness that didn't offer help. It drew boundaries. One afternoon, I met my neighbor Clara on the porch. She looked at me with that knowing expression only another woman has. "I heard about the wedding." I nodded. "It was beautiful." But beautiful isn't the same as fair." She brought me a simple cake and stayed quiet. Sometimes comfort comes in the form of silent company. That night, I went to my room and pulled out an old box, the blue diary I'd kept since James passed. I opened to the first blank page and wrote, "Day 1. I learned that when love turns into indifference, it means the other person's soul has moved somewhere else." In the following days, I started hearing the piano in my head again. James used to play when he needed to think. It was as if he were reminding me, "Watch, Lillian. Before you react, observe." And I did. I saw my son's affection turn to guilt, and guilt to obedience toward someone unworthy. I saw that Sabrina wasn't just vain. She was strategic. And I understood that if I wanted to reclaim what was mine, my respect, my space, my story, I'd have to move with the same precision she used to erase me, in silence. The first clue came from the last place I expected, the bank. A misdelivered envelope left in my mailbox by mistake bore the logo of the institution I'd used for 20 years. I opened it, and there they were, statements from the joint account Ethan and I once shared. Large withdrawals, recent transfers, and digital signatures that weren't mine. My heart went cold. It wasn't just family exclusion, it was calculated manipulation. The next day, I grabbed my coat and walked to the downtown branch. The Vancouver wind was biting, but inside me there was a dangerous calm, the kind that comes when love stops hurting and starts seeing clearly. I was greeted by Robert Miller, the branch manager, a polite man who'd known me for years. "Mrs. Carter, what a pleasure to see you. How have you been?" "Alert, Robert. That's all." I showed him the statements. He read them, adjusting his glasses, visibly uneasy. "These digital authorizations, there are 2 signatures, yours and Mrs. Sabrina Moore Carter's. Curious, isn't it? Because I never gave her access." The silence that followed said more than a confession. Robert closed the folder and spoke softly. "Would you like me to open an internal investigation?" I nodded. But discreetly. I'd rather the sound of truth come before the noise. When I left the bank, the sky was heavy with clouds. I smelled rain and could almost hear the echo of James's piano in the distance. As if he were telling me, "Don't fear what you'll uncover, Lillian. Fear what you ignore." That night, I sat at the kitchen table and began organizing everything. Statements, dates, Sabrina's messages, notes from the blue diary. I created a folder labeled Clarity, and on the first page I wrote, "Every lie has a rhythm. The secret is learning to dance in front of it without letting it know." A few days later, Robert called. "Mrs. Carter, there are signs of fraud. The logins came from Mrs. Sabrina's home IP address. We're moving forward with a forensic audit. Would you like us to proceed?" I took a deep breath. "Do what you must, but keep me invisible." I hung up and looked around. The house seemed to breathe with me. The curtains swayed, the clock ticked in rhythm. Everything around me whispered the same truth. The time for waiting was over. The next morning, I walked to the porch and found Clara sweeping leaves. "You've been different lately, Lillian. I've learned that when people underestimate you, that's the best time to start acting." She smiled knowingly. "So this is where the story changes." And right there, between the wind and the dry leaves, I felt the first spark of what freedom must feel like. When life pulls the rug from under you, sometimes what steadies you isn't hope. It's the memory of who you were before you bent. That morning, I took the documents to Naomi Blake, an old coworker who was now an attorney. I hadn't seen her in over 15 years, but I'd always admired her courage and sharp tongue. She welcomed me into her small office near the harbor, the scent of coffee mixing with the distant hum of ships. "Lillian Carter, if you've come to me, the damage must be serious. Serious enough that I've stopped pretending everything's fine." As I spoke, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. I showed her the evidence, the statements, the messages, the duplicated signatures. She listened quietly, jotting notes in a notebook. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "You have something rare, Lillian. Proof and clarity. With those, we don't beg for justice. We build it." I smiled for the first time in weeks. I don't want to destroy Naomi. I just want them to stop treating me like I died while still alive. She leaned forward, steady. "Then let's start with the basics. Take back control." That same day, she introduced me to accountant Dr. Daniel Reed, who had worked with James years earlier. A calm man, deliberate, with a precise memory. He studied the statements closely and said, "The fraudulent logins trace back to an account under the name Sabrina Moore Carter, and there are direct transfers from your old joint account to a shell company." I looked at him and for the first time felt more anger than sadness. Daniel noticed. "Lillian, sometimes the best counterattack is letting the guilty tie their own noose. Should I dig deeper?" Dig deep enough for her to hear her own echo. Naomi smiled, satisfied. "I like that tone. You don't want revenge, you want clean justice. That's rare." While she explained the legal plan, I gazed out the window. Rain drizzled down the glass and I saw my reflection, not as a broken woman, but as someone about to rise again. Before I left, Naomi held my hand. "Lillian, let me tell you something. Women like us spend half our lives begging to be heard, and the other half learning when to speak. It's your time now." Back home, I wrote in my blue diary, "Today I found the first echo of my silence, and it has a name, Naomi Blake." I placed the diary inside the Clarity folder, and when the clasp clicked shut, it sounded like a sign. It was no longer just a folder of documents. It was a plan. 2 days after meeting with Naomi, the phone rang. Sabrina's voice sounded sweet, too sweet to be genuine. "Lillian, it's so good to hear you. We're having dinner tomorrow. You should come. Ethan misses you." I breathed slowly. She never called. If she was inviting me, it wasn't for love. It was strategy. "Of course, dear. I'll be there." When Naomi found out, she was direct. "She's going to test your limits. Stay calm, but be ready." And I was. That night, Sabrina's house glowed with artificial charm, scented with expensive perfume and pretense. In the hallway, new paintings lined the walls, the kind you buy to look sophisticated. The only thing missing was the portrait of Ethan and me that used to hang at the center. She came to greet me with a hug that never quite landed. "Lillian, I'm so glad you came." "You look lovely." "And you look nervous? That suits you less?" Our eyes locked. Ethan, tense, tried to smile. Dinner was a minefield disguised under a white tablecloth. Sabrina poured wine, keeping her tone falsely light. Midway through the meal, she went straight to the point. "Lillian, we were thinking of simplifying things with the bank. You don't use that joint account anymore, do you?" My hand froze midair. "That depends on what you mean by use." She laughed awkwardly. "I mean, maybe we could transfer everything to Ethan's name, just to make things easier." I let the silence stretch. The sound of silverware filled the space. Then, calmly, like striking a match, I said, "Easier is what every con artist says right before the next move." Ethan choked on his wine. Sabrina turned pale. "What do you mean?" I reached into my purse, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. The statements, the transfers, the signatures. Every one of your steps, printed and stamped. She stared at the papers, trembling. Ethan looked at me, torn between anger and disbelief. "Mom, what is this?" "It's the truth, son, the one you both tried to edit." I stood slowly, with the kind of serenity she'd never understand. "Sabrina, at your wedding, you took me out of the front row. But I learned something interesting. Life always finds a new place for those who refuse to kneel." The silence that followed was absolute. I set my napkin down, picked up my coat, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned back. "Ethan, when you're ready to talk to the truth, the house is still mine." I closed the door gently, the sound of the lock clicking like the end of a chapter. Outside, the cold wind hit my face, and for the first time, silence was on my side. The morning after that dinner, I woke with a clear mind. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, and the wind whispered, "It's your move now." As I made coffee, I heard the familiar echo of piano keys in my head, James's way of thinking without words. Maybe that's what I needed too, to think without fear. A little later, the phone rang. It was Daniel Reed, the accountant. "Lillian, I found something you'll want to see." I went to his office. The room smelled like old paper and imminent justice. Daniel handed me a flash drive. The company that received the diverted funds is called Carter & Moore Holdings. The partners? Ethan Carter and Sabrina Moore Carter. My name appeared in the documents, without permission. My signature, forged. My house, listed as the business address. For a second, the ground seemed to tilt beneath me. It wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was identity theft. "They registered the company here?" I asked. "Yes, using your home as the official headquarters." I sat down, heart calm but cold. James had once told me, right after we married, "Never sign anything you don't understand. A name is the last home no one can take from you." Ironically, even in death, he was still protecting me. I went home and opened the wooden box inside the piano. Inside were old documents, the original deed, an insurance policy, and a letter from James, written in his steady hand. "If anyone ever tries to erase you, remember, the walls know the true owner of this house." I smiled. That letter was more than a memory. It was living proof. The deed clearly stated, the house was mine alone, with a lifetime non-transfer clause. Naomi confirmed its validity. "They can't even claim right of use without your consent. So they've been living on borrowed scenery." She laughed. "And the show's about to close." Meanwhile, I was preparing another kind of counterattack. An emotional one. I didn't report them. I didn't confront them. I started acting as if nothing had happened, which threw Sabrina completely off balance. I sent her flowers on her birthday with a note. "May your new home bring the comfort that respect could not." She replied with a short, cold message. "Thank you. We'll talk soon." 2 days later, she knocked on my door. She stood there, upright but uneasy, guilt already cracking her posture. "Lillian, can we talk?" "Of course, it's my house." She stepped inside, standing in the hallway like a guest unwelcome even to herself. "Ethan didn't know anything. I just wanted to help." "Help who, Sabrina? Me or yourself?" She said nothing. I pointed to a folder on the table. "Here's the deed, and here's the company contract. Same address. Do you know what that means?" That Everything will have to be undone. It means you never owned what you thought you did. You were living inside an illusion you built on theft. She went silent. The ticking clock filled the room. Then, in a small, trembling voice, she asked, "Why don't you just report me?" I took a deep breath. Because humiliation is a temporary punishment. Reflection isn't. When she left, I felt something new for the first time. Not anger, but power. I sat at the piano and pressed a single key. The sound rang through the house, clear, strong, eternal. It was the voice of truth, rising from the walls. After Sabrina's visit, the house was filled with a new kind of silence, the silence of clarity. It was no longer the echo of loneliness, but the sound of understanding everything at last. For days, I reviewed documents line by line with Naomi and Daniel. Every signature, every transfer, every move traced the ambition of someone who never learned the value of calm. Then Daniel uncovered something worse. The forged documents used a digital copy of my signature, taken from an old donation contract, the very one Sabrina had asked me to look over months before the wedding. She'd set the trap from the start. Naomi looked up from the papers, outraged. "This isn't just fraud, Lillian. It's a full-blown crime. Do you want us to take it to the prosecutor's office?" I thought for a moment. Not yet. I want to look into the eyes of the ones who thought I was weak first. She nodded. Sometimes justice needs time to be born with dignity. That night, rain tapped against the windows, and the sound took me back to an old memory. James at the piano, telling me that respect is like music. Rush it, and it goes off key. I opened the blue diary and wrote, "Today I learned that pain, when it doesn't break me, tunes me." 2 days later, Olivia, the wedding photographer, showed up unexpectedly. She held a box with her studio's logo. "I thought you might want to see this." Inside were photos and audio files never delivered to the family. Among them, a recorded snippet of Sabrina telling her maid of honor, "After today, the old woman's done. She's got no say anymore." Hearing it didn't break me, it freed me. Because in that instant, I realized the very words meant to erase me would be the ones to give me my voice back. I thanked Olivia, eyes wet. Keep that safe. One day it might help someone remember who they are. The next morning the phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice sounded cracked, like glass after a storm. "Mom, can we talk?" When he arrived, his eyes carried that look only a guilty son has, a mix of shame and longing. We sat in the portrait room. Behind me, James's photo watched silently. Sabrina told me part of what she did. Part? "I didn't know she used your name to open the company. I swear, Mom." I looked him straight in the eyes. "You didn't know because you chose not to. Chosen ignorance is also a form of guilt." He lowered his head. "I just wanted peace, Mom." "Peace can't be built on lies, son. Peace is what truth sounds like once it's accepted." For a moment, the silence between us became a bridge, not a wall. And there, before me, I saw the little boy who once held my hand to cross the street. He cried, and I let him. I didn't hug him, not yet. Forgiveness, I'd learned, also needs time to ripen. That night, I sat at the piano and played the first notes of the song James composed for our anniversary. It sounded different, slower, deeper, but somehow more beautiful, as if each note whispered, "You've come back to yourself." I closed my eyes and promised silently. The truth would come out, not with noise or anger, but with the grace of someone who wins by simply being herself. Dawn broke under a copper-colored sky. The air felt heavy, not like a threat, but like a warning. Something was about to shift. A little after 9, the gate creaked open. It was Clara, my neighbor, carrying a basket and the kind of knowing smile that says everything without words. Brought lemon cake. They say sugar and truth work better together. She stepped inside, glanced around the tidy house, the fresh flowers on the table, and sighed. "So it's true. You're back." I smiled. "I'm back, and now the world will have to adjust to my rhythm." As we poured coffee, I told her everything. The evidence, the company, my talk with Ethan, and my new decision to make everything official through Naomi. Clara listened quietly. After a long pause, she said calmly, "You know what amazes me, Lillian? You don't want revenge. You want respect. That's what makes you stronger than all of them." Her words reached deeper than she knew. In that moment, I realized, true strength doesn't shout. It stands tall while everything else falls apart. Before leaving, Clara placed an envelope on the counter. A gift. Inside was a copy of an old letter from James, one she'd kept by mistake, or maybe by fate. The letter read, "The future of our family will always be safe as long as her name stays on the deed, because what's built with love is built to last." Something settled inside me then. This was no longer a fight over property. It was about legacy. That afternoon, Naomi called. "Lillian, you need to hear this." A local reporter, Henry Lewis, reached out. He's investigating shell companies and mentioned Carter and Moore Holdings. He wants to talk to you. I thought for a moment. I don't want headlines, Naomi. I want awareness. If he can tell the story without using my name, let him. 2 days later, Henry came by the house. A calm man, observant, the kind who listens more than he speaks. "Mrs. Carter, I heard someone tried to erase your story." "They didn't just try. For a while, they succeeded." "But truth is stubborn, Mr. Lewis. It always finds its way home." I handed him copies of the documents, the audio of Sabrina and James's letter. He promised confidentiality, then said something I'd never forget. "People underestimate quiet women until they decide to speak." The article came out a week later. A simple but powerful title: Shell Companies and the Invisible Scams Targeting Elderly Women. No names were mentioned, but those who needed to understand did. On the street, neighbors greeted me differently, not with pity, but with respect. Respect finally had a sound again. That evening, I sat on the porch with Clara. The sun dipped behind the trees and she said, "You know, Lillian, maybe this was never about money." It never was. It was about reminding the world that age doesn't silence a woman's voice. I looked at the horizon and smiled. And now, my friend, it's time to turn that voice into proof. I opened the blue diary and wrote, "Today, truth gained allies, and every one of them has a woman's face." The news spread faster than I expected. Henry Lewis's article rippled through local groups, social media, and business forums. The name Carter and Moore Holdings began to be whispered with unease. Sabrina started feeling the weight of her own choices, and as always, she chose confrontation. On Thursday night, my gate slammed open. She stormed in uninvited, eyes red, face swollen with rage. "It was you, wasn't it? You and that pathetic lawyer? You ruined my life." I stood still, not stepping back. "Your life or your lie?" She threw a magazine onto the table. The headline read in bold, "Women Financially Betrayed by Family, a Growing Crime." Everyone's looking at me differently. I lost clients, friends, everything. "Sabrina, what you lost was never yours to begin with. What's taken without right always finds its way back." She breathed hard, tears mixing with fury. "I just wanted a little power, a place in this family. You were always perfect. You had everything." For a moment, I almost pitied her. But then I remembered the torn portrait, the crossed-out chair at the church, the muted microphone. And I understood. She never wanted a place. She wanted mine. The kind of power you craved comes with a price, Sabrina, and yours is due. Just then, the door opened again. Ethan walked in, his face a mix of guilt and disbelief. "What's going on?" Sabrina spun toward him, shouting, "Your mother destroyed everything." He looked at me. "Mom?" Without a word, I handed him the envelope Naomi had prepared, the final documents. "Read, son, and when you're done, look me in the eye and tell me love justifies blindness." He read silently. His hands shook. When he finished, he turned to Sabrina. "You used my mother's name to open the company, using her address?" She tried to defend herself, her words stumbling. I did it for us, Ethan. She was never going to share anything. He stepped back. There's nothing left to share once you've stolen. The silence that followed was the heaviest I'd ever felt. Not the silence of pain, the silence of conscience being born. Ethan looked at me, eyes full of tears. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. Start by standing up, son. The rest comes with time. Sabrina collapsed onto the couch, face in her hands. The woman who once tried to erase me now looked like the shadow of her own pride. Moments later, Naomi arrived, steps firm. I have the warrants. The hearing will be scheduled within 10 days. Lillian, are you ready? More than ever. Sabrina rose, desperate. You won't destroy me, Lillian. I looked at her, calm. I don't have to. You've done that yourself. As Naomi read the legal clauses aloud, I heard the wind slip through the window cracks, the same wind that marked the beginning of this story. But now it didn't bring cold. It brought cleansing. When everyone left, I stood alone in the room. I picked up James's photo from the piano and whispered, She tried to push me out of the front row, love, but look at me now. I ended up at center stage. I pressed a single key on the piano, letting the note fill the house. The music sounded like a prayer. And I knew the climax was near, and it would be worthy. The wind that night carried a sense of omen. On my desk, the documents were spread out like chess pieces, each page a calculated move. Naomi was on the phone confirming the court date. Daniel reviewed the reports. I simply watched, calm, almost serene. Are you going to testify in person? Naomi asked. No, I'm going to conduct it. I explained the plan. No revenge, only revelation. A dinner at my house, with Ethan and Sabrina present, before the hearing. Everything recorded, no yelling, no humiliation, just facts and awareness. I spent the day preparing every detail. White tablecloth, crystal glasses, the candle James used to light on our anniversaries. At the center of the table, the blue diary. That was where the truth would be served. When the doorbell rang, my heart beat steadily, without tremor. Ethan entered first, tired, remorseful eyes. Sabrina followed, worn down, her pride fading into silence. Mom, what is this? It's the dinner you forgot to invite me to a year ago. I poured the wine, sat down, and said quietly, Listen, then decide whether you'll keep pretending. I turned on the recorder. Naomi, connected by video call, confirmed receipt of the documents. Proof of the fraud, James's letter, the recordings. Sabrina tried to interrupt. You want to expose me? I want you to see yourself. I placed a photo of the wedding on the table, the one with my empty chair. This is where it began, an absence born of pride. Tonight it ends. The silence was heavy. Ethan looked at Sabrina. Give back what you took, now. She cried, tears blurring with regret. I'll return everything. I just wanted to be recognized. Recognition isn't stolen. It's earned. I opened the blue diary and read the last entry. Those who underestimated me taught me the value of patience. Those who hurt me showed me where my strength lives. Leaving the diary open, I stood and walked to the piano. I played the melody James composed, the closing theme to a story far too long. When the final note faded, Naomi spoke through the screen. Mrs. Carter, everything's recorded. The hearing will be a formality. Sabrina, sobbing, asked, Will you report me? I answered softly, I don't need to. The truth is already doing that for me. They left in silence. At last, the house breathed again. I inhaled the rosemary scent from the candles, the warm air of late afternoon, and thought, revenge is a waste of elegance. Justice is not. I closed the diary and wrote on its cover, Plan complete, dignity restored. The hearing was set for a cold Monday morning. Vancouver's sky was gray, and the distant church bells rang softly, a poetic reminder that even justice has something sacred about it. I wore a navy blue suit, the same shade as the dress from the wedding. Not by accident, it was the color of starting over. Naomi walked beside me, steady and confident, while Daniel carried the sealed envelope of evidence. The courthouse felt like a cathedral of late truths. Marble floors reflected the light, every footstep echoing like a prelude. And when I sat in the front row, I noticed the irony. This time, no one could take me out of it. Ethan entered a few minutes later, head bowed. Behind him came Sabrina, pale, clutching a folder like it could still shield her. She avoided my eyes. The judge, a gray-haired woman with a sharp, composed expression, opened the session. Case number 2114, Lillian Carter versus Carter and Moore Holdings. Naomi rose. Her voice was firm, each word a stroke of elegance. Your Honor, we're here regarding document and property fraud committed against my client by those close to her, including unauthorized use of her identity and assets. Sabrina began trembling. The judge looked directly at her. Do you confirm these signatures on the contracts? She hesitated. I thought they were family authorizations. Authorization implies consent. Forged consent is a crime, the judge replied coolly. Naomi continued. We request the playback of the recording voluntarily provided by Mrs. Carter. The screen lit up and Sabrina's voice filled the courtroom. I just wanted to be recognized. I'll give it all back. The murmur that followed was immediate. Ethan closed his eyes, holding back tears. The judge's face softened slightly. Mrs. Carter, would you like to make a statement? I stood. Each step to the center of the room felt like closing a decades-long circle. Your Honor, I spent half my life believing love was enough to earn respect. I've learned that respect only grows when we choose ourselves. I don't ask for punishment. I ask that my husband's and my names be cleared. Because inheritance isn't what we leave in money, it's what we leave in character. The judge studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Statement recorded. As the lawyers exchanged papers, I saw Ethan silently crying. When he looked at me, I saw again the little boy who once promised, Mom, I'll always protect you. And I understood, broken promises can still be rebuilt. After deliberation, the judge announced, the property is reinstated fully under the name of Lillian Carter. The defendants must repay all diverted funds and face civil penalties. The gavel struck, like the final chord of a symphony James himself might have written. Naomi squeezed my hand. We did it. No, Naomi, we honored it. Sabrina remained motionless. When she finally rose, she approached me cautiously. Lillian, I lifted a hand, stopping her gently. There's nothing left to say. Sometimes forgiveness is simply the silence of someone who refuses to keep carrying the weight. She nodded through tears as the officers escorted her away. Ethan stayed. He came to me, knelt, and took my hands. Mom, please forgive me. Stand up, Ethan. Forgiveness only works between equals. The hug we shared wasn't joyful. It was recognizing what still remained. Leaving the courthouse, the cold air brushed my face and a gap opened in the clouds. The sun broke through, touching my skin with a soft, golden warmth. I thought of James. And for a heartbeat, I heard his voice whisper, You're back in the front row, Lillian. I smiled. Reporters waited outside with cameras and microphones, but Naomi shielded me. Today, no one needs to say anything more. The ones who needed to understand, did. On the way home, the radio played one of James's old piano pieces. The wind moved through the garden trees, and the gate closed behind me with a gentle sound, as if the house itself could finally rest. I stepped inside, left my shoes by the door, pressed my hand against the wall, and felt both the coolness of stone and the warmth of victory. I looked around and whispered, Everything they tried to take now returns to me as peace. It's been 4 months since the trial. The autumn sun paints the garden in shades of gold, and the wind that once carried memories now brings the scent of renewal. The house, once a stage for silence and tears, has become a home again. Every corner seems to thank me for enduring. The curtains dance with the breeze and the clock ticks in rhythm with my peace. In the living room, James's piano plays again. Sometimes it's Ethan, timidly trying a few notes, as if asking the past for permission to start anew. Other times, it's me, playing softly, letting the music fill the space that pain once occupied. Sabrina is fulfilling the terms of the settlement. She now volunteers at New Voice, a foundation that helps women who've suffered financial manipulation. Naomi told me she's different these days, quieter, more thoughtful. One day, I received a letter from her. "Lillian, I finally understand what you wanted me to see. It wasn't about losing money. It was about learning the weight of respect. Thank you for not destroying me." I folded the letter, placed it inside the blue diary, and smiled. Late regret is still a seed for change. Sunday afternoons have regained their flavor. Ethan arrives with flowers and cake, and Clara joins us, laughing and telling her exaggerated stories. Sometimes we talk about the past, without bitterness, just gratitude that it's over. The other day, Ethan asked, "Mom, don't you feel any anger?" I looked at him and replied, "Anger is a prison, son. I chose to be free." On the porch, the sunset paints the windows copper. The air smells of cake, coffee, and new beginnings. I write in the blue diary, "There's no such thing as perfect justice, but there is peace when love reunites with truth." I close the diary and place it on the piano. Looking at James's photo, the same smile, the same gaze, I think, maybe life was always about learning to return to yourself. The wind blows, the curtains open on their own, as if the universe itself were saying, "It's over. You've won," in the most beautiful way, without hate. A year has passed since the trial. The flowers in the garden bloom again, and the sound of the piano drifts through the house, a gentle reminder that peace can make noise too. Life is made of small gestures once more, the smell of coffee, the sun warming the porch, Clara's laughter, and Ethan's visits, now free of guilt, hurry, or secrets. He always asks if I'm happy, and I always answer, not happy, at peace. And that's worth more. Sometimes I think of Sabrina. I've heard she's still at the foundation. I read in an article that she recently told a young woman, "Never sign anything you don't understand." I smiled. Maybe the world really does fix itself one piece at a time. Today, I write these lines sitting by the piano, the blue diary open on my lap. The last page is blank. Not because there's no story left, but because there's finally nothing left to prove. I take a deep breath, feel the wind on my face, and whisper, "James, I kept my promise." Our name once again stands for respect. I rise and walk to the wall where Ethan's wedding photo once hung. In its place now is a new picture. Me, Ethan, and Clara, smiling in the garden, the late afternoon light glowing in our eyes. No luxury, no posing, just life, restored. And if you, listening to me now, have ever felt invisible, disrespected, or erased, remember this: no one can take away the place of a woman who's learned to sit peacefully inside her own story. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever lived a moment when you had to choose between others' love and your own self-respect? I want to hear your story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because every woman who rebuilds herself lights the way for another. And here on this channel, we believe dignity doesn't age, it blooms.